Welcome to the Week 3 discussion group for this Module A1 of Survey Scholar. This is the 13th of September 2017. It's Wednesday, which is the same day each week that we will be having this discussion group. And what we mean, the discussion and participatory part will become increasingly obvious as we progress. Just a reminder of the ground rules. This is a slide you'll see each time, but do keep in mind, be mindful of what it says. And the fairly complex agenda for this, and hopefully not overly optimistic timings for this session. So let's get started. And great to see all of these cities and country names and names flying by. And so let's start with the Week 3 checklist. So as you know, you're working really in two parallel tracks. There are the activities you do in the community, and which is shared with everyone. And then there is Creator, which is your private space that you've been working on. And it's only after submitting your concept note at the end of this week that you will begin to see the works of others and be asked to give feedback while other people are also giving your project feedback. So this, you should be just well aware of what the requirements are as well. So these are really just reminders. And of course, the big red scary slide, but hopefully not too scary, is that the first deadline has been extended to Sunday evening. And that deadline, there are actually two items that are due. The big one is your draft concept note for the Harmonia Vaccination Coverage Survey. But there is also the Week 3 community assignment, and very pleased to have Dale Rhoda with us today to, I see Carolina as well, are both on separate channels. We'll clarify exactly how whether they're sitting together or not, because they are both at HQ in Geneva right now. So both of those, Dale is back to help us with the Week 3 community assignment and lead the discussion. So I actually want to send an unmute request to Dale because I believe that he is sitting physically with Carolina.
Yes.
Okay. And to turn to Carolina for some brief, to the point words of advice on finishing your concept note. We've been, of course, paying close attention to the comments and the feedback you've been giving us, and want to address specifically those 3 points. Carolina, hi, and please go ahead.
Hi, I hope everybody can hear me. Hello from Geneva. We have received some questions about the concept note, because obviously when you put 12 criteria, it looks as if it's going to be long, but it's really for you to guide you through the elements that it should contain. But we are really thinking here of a very high-level summary of what you're planning to do. This is not by any means a replacement of the protocol. This is more what you can use when you are, for example, not even sure how much a survey is going to cost you, and you're working with your advisory or steering committee to define the main parameters and the main elements of your survey that are going to be driving the sample size and how long it's going to take. So with that said, length and purpose are different. We are not expecting more than 3-4 pages at most. If you can do 2 pages and include the main points of each area, that's great. There have been questions, for example, about the sampling strategy, and I want to clarify that point 7 of the rubric. The sampling strategy is really very high level at this point. It's to make you think if you're going to be doing what are your primary sampling units, secondary sampling units, and how you're going to be going about them. You probably, following the guidance in the manual, if available, you may want to use enumeration areas and that are roughly of a similar size. And in this concept note, you can not even know if you're going to have to segment enumeration areas or if you will have to merge So that's not, at this time, we are not going to get into that because that's when it gets complicated, and that's most of module 2. So here is just to mention what are your primary sampling units, secondary sampling units, and how you're going to go to the houses, and also if you're going to do enumeration. And similarly, for survey implementation, is something very high level. Are you going to outsource it to a bidding purpose, a bidding strategy of hiring a third party? Are you going to work with a university? Who is going to be doing the work? And the general overview of how you're thinking about doing it. Again, this may change in the protocol. So you can see, just for an example, we'll go through it, but the Bolivia concept note, that at least as an example, it was useful for that particular country to get money for their survey and to get the political backup for them to implement it. And then we can even discuss what things were done differently than in the protocol, different from what there was initially desired. So I hope that this is, makes it more clear, and we will talk a little bit about the budgets, but that in what our expectation is not that you submit a very clear and detailed budget. You think about the key drivers of budget. For example, how many strata you're going to have and how big your sample size is for each strata. Other drivers are, in Harmonia, you don't know this, but let's assume that there are not particularly difficult to reach areas. Also, how you're planning to do the enumeration or the household listing. If you're planning to use tablets for data collection versus paper, because then the elements in the budget are different. And I think those are the really big elements. And if you are just looking to whether you're going to go to health facilities. So in Harmonia, based on the information you have an idea of how many people with vaccination cards you may be likely to find. And you need to decide what you're going to do with the rest. I hope that makes it clear. Now, please post your questions. Thank you.
Yep. And thanks, Carolina. And we'll have more time later for you to ask your questions and get the microphone to do so. Do type your questions and comments in the feedback. The ones we do not get to, we will in the in Scholar or as a follow-up. I want to quickly run through the feedback and try to make up a little bit on time. Of course, you have this slide deck, so if you'd like to dig in and get a sense of how how you're feeling about the course, here's how we are feeling as a group. And we appreciate there's some very nice, very positive comments, but we do have some areas for improvement this week that have been noted by participants, and we're grateful for that. There's a large number of people, but fewer than in the first weeks, who've given us feedback, so that's very helpful. Because last week too was really focused on sample size calculation, we're very pleased to see this comment that we actually helped alleviate the anxiety participant felt about statistics in general. And in terms of difficulty, we have a good spread that reflects the diversity of the course, and we do take note and take to heart 3 potential areas for improvement. Yes, we know that there is an issue with the fire hose of notifications and how little control is either all on or on off. That is going to be fixed. It may not be fixed during the course, but that is very high on our to-do list. And apologies for those of you who feel overwhelmed. We have shared strategies and ways to manage that, and hopefully those have been helpful. The question about what's not being covered at all in this module, I would refer you to the reference manual, which is more comprehensive. Obviously, we had to make choices about what we would focus on, and Carolina has already addressed the second issue. And I am making an effort, and have asked other presenters to do the same, to slow down on the pace of speaking. And we are working with a small but significant cohort of French speakers to progress. Task completion, again, this group is doing extremely well. As in previous weeks, half of you are saying you're spending just enough time or less than what you expected, and the other half are saying you're having to spend more time than you expected. So Yes, we appreciate the fact that it's challenging, that you don't get to stop work to go to a training, but you have to figure out how to work this into your schedule of professional work, but also family and other commitments. So we do appreciate that and take note of that as well in our thinking through what the implications are for the coming weeks. As we have been saying, the first 3 weeks are the most intense. You're still very highly motivated. Most of you are getting the support you need, at least those of you who are completing the feedback survey. And in terms of support, there has been some appreciation, more than several comments about appreciation of the availability of the course team and of some of its members who seem to be doing this 24/7. So I did want to mention that. So that's it for the for feedback. I hope that helps you get a sense of the. We won't be giving as much feedback each week going forward, but here is now again continuing the discussion on week 2 assignment. Keeping in mind that this is the point of this assignment is also to help you as you work on the concept note and on the sampling section of the concept note for Harmonia. So I'm going to hand it over to Dale to give you some additional feedback. You have, of course, the update posted in the community, and that's the main source for feedback, but it's really important to hear firsthand from him his follow-up comments about the update. Go ahead, Dale.
Thank you, Rita. So congratulations, everybody. There were so many answers that were just spot on. People seem to follow the logic of using the quantities A, B, C, D, and E and be able to follow the equations. And people also had good comments in the homework about the terrifically large size of the survey that the Harmonia committee was asking for to begin with. So most of you calculated the correct numbers. If you look at the answer key that we have posted and you find that your numbers were wildly off, then let's have a conversation. You can send me your calculations and we can figure out what was the challenge there. Happy to do that. I would say probably the most questions were about how do we select values of M and how do we select values of ICC. And I have posted some responses to that in the questions and answers that have been posted, and then we are preparing responses to additional questions that you have asked. So we'll post some updated answers to Q&A. If you still have questions about that, then after you see the new Q&A, then we'll discuss it even some more. I would encourage you also to look at the sections in the manual that discuss those issues. I think that's it, Rita.
Great, thank you, Dale. We now want to continue, sort of follow up on the sample size calculation, and really interested not so much in the steps in the procedure for carrying out the calculation as your reflections and insights and analysis on the trade-offs between the scenarios that you have been exploring. So in between weeks 2 and 3, going from comparing from 100 to 10 strata, and then this week looking at classification at the province level. So this is, for those of you who were here last week, we asked for volunteers, and this is also about practicing and honing the oral presentation skills of being able to, on short notice, formulate something based on the work that you have been doing. Many of you are already very much expert at this, and we've seen some, already seen and heard some excellent presentations. So what I'm going to need is for at least one person to raise their hand using the little raise hand icon you see in the attendees panel, and to volunteer to discuss. With respect to the Harmonia case, what you what are some of the trade-offs and what they mean potentially for the actual survey, and of course for what you are formulating in your concept notes. So we have 122 people. It is impossible that there is not at least one person who will. Okay, great. All right, so Bo Robert Brzezinski, if I remember correctly, you have made a moral commitment to raise your hand when no one else does. So we may be hearing from you in the coming weeks, but I do want to encourage people. I know this may seem so this may seem challenging because it's a new medium if you're not familiar with these kinds of calls, but we'd love to hear from you, and this is very much about participation. So, Bo Robert, please go ahead. Going to start the timer, and the floor is yours.
Well, correctly so. You may choose to not select me, but I want to help you out as a facilitator to get the thing flowing. Yeah, well, I mean, I start from the aspect of that sample size is the natural enemy of data quality. Any sample size is the natural enemy. As soon as you have to ask people questions, you run into trouble. And the more people you have to ask questions, the more difficult the situation you're in. So obviously, everything gets more complex the bigger it is. There are some economies of scale even to household surveys, so that as soon as you have an operation started, it is relatively easier to make the operation slightly bigger. But obviously there is some sort of cap there that unfortunately seems to get penetrated at all times. I thought when I started doing household surveys that something around 6,000 households was where we would want to be. And now working with the MIX program, we ended up with 12,000 households on average in the last round, and unfortunately, it looks like it's going to get even bigger. The good news is that everyone gets better and better at doing this, and we get better and better at monitoring these things. So sample sizes get more and more manageable. But I do have some experiences with hundreds of thousands of households. And there's more than 100 people on this call, so I should watch my tone. But I mean, they're all horrendous data quality, and you end up with the terminology that Dale was using that I liked, really on whether your estimates become useful. I think it was Dale anyway. Your estimates are no longer useful if you can't say that they're accurate in terms of data quality. Time is another factor. Obviously, you can't be in the field forever. You're dealing with human beings that are running around in typically very difficult situations, being away from their families for an extended period of time. So any field work, usually above 3 months, is really, really putting a strain on your field workers. Obviously, money is a factor. Somehow it seems to not be a problem in some places and then in other places, but it is about value for money. So do we really need to be as precise as we want to be, is my general question to this. And I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Dale and Carolina, would you like to comment or respond or follow up?
Thank you, Bo. That was great. Yeah, I agree that sample size is the enemy of data quality, and we have to find a compromise. We have to, at the end of the day, have something to give to the decision makers, and there are a number of healthy tensions here, and reasonable people can disagree about how to prioritize these things. So I think it's good to have a discussion at the first, and also for the decision makers to have an expectation about what they're going to get at the end, and so they can already begin anticipating how they may use it. We'd love to hear from one more person. If there's someone else who'd like to give their perspective here, and if there isn't, then I think it will be fine to move on, Rita. If someone else is raised their hand, then we can do that.
Yep. So we have Talil Ahmed, who is. You need to unmute yourself, Talil, and then we'll be able to hear you. So just click on the big microphone button. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. And the discussion on how many strata would be the best without having the contextual information is challenging, because you do not know whether that country has only 100 strata or whether they have 1 million strata, and their representativeness and how that information will be used, unless you know only they want to know those particular strata. And the geographical issues, security, mobility, access, the timing of the survey, all those things will either hinder or will help the quality assurance of the survey. And this type of survey demands that either you have you pre-select the household if you have a very good map, or whether you have to visit. The question it is, in a certain countries where we operate, the number of qualified people who are able to do such kind of work in 100 strata simultaneously itself is a very uneasy and difficult. And there is no strong good maps that will allow you to select in the household remotely. Therefore, without having the contextual information, only dry numbers of 100 strata, is it better than 10 strata? It is, you can guess, but in order to be closer to the precise, then you need additional information, and those additional information will guide you whether, based on the timing and the money and all the other issues surrounding whether 100 strata is okay or not. But as in a session to learn how to calculate the sample size is beautiful, but in reality normally is much different. And for instance, where we operate in many parts of Africa, in Somali region, in Somalia, in Nigeria, in Haiti, and other places, the reality is different, and that's what will dictate what is right and what can you achieve within that small period you have in order to be your survey to become more believable. It's very hard to have an accurate. Everything is a guess, and the probability you need to be closer to the true coverage of that particular place. I think that's what I can say, and thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. That's 5 seconds ahead of the clock. Dale and Carolina.
This is Carolina. Just thank you so much to the presenters. I want to add or emphasize the point that was made, that you have to do a survey that is realistic, that quality is important, and also where one thing is what you hope to do, and then the realities in the field. So I think those are factors that we need to balance. And just want to say that in scenarios here in week 2 and week 3, we are just making you practice with different scenarios. Then for your concept note, you can pick different scenarios as you consider more appropriate with the information you have for Harmonia, which again, it's assuming that there are no special populations or special areas where you for sure would want to oversample, because it's in a real survey, you can do different strata, not only by geographical level, but you can decide to pick the capital, for example, or the big cities and everything else. And then, yes, you can, in a weighted manner, in a post-stratification, with post-stratification weights, you can bring these estimates together to give you a good, and by good I mean a more precise national estimate.
Okay, thank you, Carolina. There seems to be a microphone issue. There seems to be an echo, and it may be coming from your speaker. You may need to turn the volume down on your side, at least when you are speaking. Yeah, so there are some, you will be able to hear clearly, Carolina, on the recording of the session. So bear with us. as we work through these technical issues. So next up is the week 3 community assignments. So I am assuming that all of you are working. We've seen some, not the dozens of comments, because a key part of the week 3 assignments is to make a request for additional information that is needed in response to the steering committee member who is interested in classification. So here, before Dale provides a more definitive answer, we'd like to invite participants to step up to ask for more information from the Harmonia Steering Committee. So with respect to this question, what additional information would you need to be able to calculate sample size for classification? So I see Adama Dakisaga has his hand raised from a previous exercise, so I'm hoping he is ready to, if you could unmute yourself and speak to the Harmonia Steering Committee to request information needed to calculate sample size for classification, for the purpose of classification. Adama, are you able to unmute yourself? And if there are others willing and able to step up, many of you have already asked very specific questions in the comments to the assignment, but we thought this would be a good exercise to do in the discussion group. Okay. And again, as you've been discovering through the last 3 weeks, this is not a course where you just sit and listen to a lecture. Every step of the way, we're going to be asking you to participate, and we will begin calling on people whether or not, if no one raises their hand. This is a bit, but we are amongst adult professionals and would expect at least some of you to step up to the challenge, especially since you've been so active and committed every step of the way in this course on all the activities. So Adama is not unmuting himself. I see Fateh Azmatullah. Okay, thank you, Fateh, yes. Oh, and Michael Edelstein. Sorry, the list is so long that I may have missed you, and if I did, apologies for that. Go ahead, Fateh Azmatullah. Welcome, and what would you like to know from the Harmonia Steering Committee, represented today by Dale and Carolina?
Yeah. My question to representative committee will be that for going to classification as compared to evaluation, that we are taking 15 clusters at least from one stratum. What is the relevance of this number of taking at least 15 clusters in classification as compared to 30 clusters in comparison, and so and so?
Thank you. That's a great question, Fateh. We will be sure to provide the response in writing as well as by voice here, so that everyone can look at it more carefully. So Fateh points out that the manual suggests when you are estimating coverage, you should use no fewer than 30 clusters per stratum. And when you are classifying coverage, the manual recommends that you should use no fewer than 15 clusters per stratum, although sometimes the spreadsheet will go down below 15. The spreadsheet does not know about the guidance in the manual. We could put a limit in there. That might be a good idea. The reasoning for the 15 is to say that if you are going to fewer than 50, of course, if coverage in the stratum is uniform and homogeneous spatially throughout the stratum, then you could only go to one place and you could estimate coverage from one location. But we know that coverage varies from location to location. Spatially, it varies. And so we don't want to go to a small number of clusters, because we will miss out on estimating the heterogeneity, the spatial heterogeneity of coverage if we go to fewer than 15 clusters. So we want to go to at least 15, even if we're classifying. And then when we are estimating, we want to go to at least 30 for more precise estimation. So the number 15 is not the result of a complicated calculation. It's just a guideline. But if you propose going to fewer than 15 places, then we would think there is a risk that you will underestimate the heterogeneity, and the classification will not be maybe based on a sample that is robust and representative. Over.
Thank you, Dale. So we have, yes, so Fateh Asmatullah, if you have a follow-up question, please type it in the chat. We've had several questions in the chat from, I saw the first one was actually asking, yes, from Simon Kadu Sentamu, to the stakeholders, how much money, the ballpark range, is available for this survey? So that's question one. Question two, how does deriving the DEFF change if I employ a mixture of cluster sampling and simple random sampling of the strata in my sampling strategy? And then there's some comments about the poor audio quality, and I can only apologize on behalf of the internet for that. Dale, would you like to respond to those two questions, please?
Okay. Yes, Caroline is going to respond to the money question. I will respond to the design effect question. You should not use simple random sampling at the stratum level. You will not have a up-to-date sampling frame of all the eligible children. So I've never, I mean, I would be curious to see a situation where it is feasible. Let me back it up. I've never seen a situation where simple random sampling is feasible or advisable for at the stratum level. We always do cluster surveys, and we might do simple random sampling within the clusters, but we don't do simple random sampling at the stratum level for two reasons. First, we don't have an up-to-date sampling frame. We don't have a list of the eligible children in the whole stratum. And second, it's even if the stratum is geographically small, even if it's just the capital city, as Carolina mentioned earlier, then you it still would be a lot of logistics to make the many dozens of separate individual trips to interview one caretaker for each trip. So I've never seen a situation where simple random sampling is the right approach. And Carolina is going to address the question of cost.
Yeah, it looks, Dale, like you've muted yourself. Okay.
Carolina put on her headphones to try to see if she can get better quality, so she's going to reply from her computer.
Great, thank you.
Consideration, because even if you had all the money,
I've only unmuted you now. Sorry, I just saw. Okay, I just understood what you were doing. So please start over.
Okay, sorry. The answer for the money part, it's a very tricky one, because obviously you want to invest most of your money in vaccinating people, and we always need to keep in mind that a survey is a tool to let us know where we are and to give us some ideas to explore on what factors may be related to not being vaccinated or to being vaccinated. So in terms of the funding, it's very difficult to say because it depends a lot on the country, how much money would be available for a survey. In a small country, it would not make sense to invest a whole lot of money in a survey. And even in a large country, if you are going just for monitoring and having an idea, you don't want the survey to cost more than your vaccines and money. So even if you had all the money in the world, I could never advise you to use it all in a survey as opposed to vaccinating. With that said, the idea here is that you propose something that you consider useful, that you consider that can answer the questions of the countries, that can do it in a manner that will ensure the quality of the field work, of the analysis, etc. And that is, and then you check if that ideal design that you think is going to meet all those criteria you can afford. If you cannot afford it, you see where you can compromise, not in quality, but where you can compromise mostly in precision, and that has to do with size. And then you see if what you can come up with, it's good enough that would allow you still to make decisions, and then go for that design that is a little cheaper. I always compare it with cars. We all, well, at least I would sometimes like to have a Ferrari, but I would not sacrifice the feeling of my family to buy myself a Ferrari. And maybe I have to settle for a smaller car as long as that car is useful for what I need it to do for me. I hope that's useful. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Carolina. We have a number of questions in the queue, but we also have a Michael Edelstein who's had his hand up for a while. So thank you for your patience, Michael. Welcome.
Dale. I'm seeing a lot of questions here in the feed. I'm just going to answer some of them quickly.
Okay, and then we'll go to Michael. Yes, go ahead.
Hi,
so Michael, a little bit more patience. A little bit more patience, Michael. Dale is first.
People are asking, someone's asking about birth rates and infant mortality to calculate the eligible children per household. I think the eligible children per household should be given in the case study, and you can just assume that it's the same everywhere in Harmonia. So you don't have to calculate that region by region. There's a question about, let me turn off the There are questions about DHS coverage by antigen and region from the earlier time periods and the weather conditions and things like that. You'll just have to go with the information that you have. We're not going to provide a more nuanced description of the country, more of these socioeconomic details than what you have. So you have to make the best use of what you have in the case study description. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Dale. And we'll follow up on these questions and make sure we're I believe you know there are questions for which we'll be providing more answers and additional details. But thanks, Dale, for that clarification. Let me now go to Michael, who's been waiting for a while. Welcome, Michael. Apologies for the wait, but we are a very large number, very active group, which is a positive. So. Thank you for your indulgence. How are you doing, and what are the questions or comments you'd like to make with respect to? So we've moved naturally from the week 3 sort of midweek question, which just two more general considerations about Harmonia, but we'd love to hear from you about either.
Yeah, it was actually about the week 3 contribution. And it was about one of the issues that's not raised here is the threshold is set is not at 90%, but it hasn't been stated what is sort of the lower acceptable level at which we want to go and investigate. So in other words, the delta that you would include in the calculation in terms of additional information.
Thanks, Michael. Dale?
Yes, that's correct. That there's some missing information that you need to do the sample size calculation, and so we'll give that to you now. We'll give it to you in writing after the call. So let's just want to view it with no changes. Just a moment. So we want to, for classification, we want to identify the provinces that have Penta 3 coverage very likely to be below 90%. So we consider the programmatic threshold for classification to be 90%. And then we say, if the true coverage is as low as 80%, so that means the delta is 10% here, and that means the direction is below, then the committee would like to draw a strong conclusion to classify the coverage in the province as fail. So when the true coverage is below 80%, they want it to be likely that the classification will say fail. And they want the probability of fail to be at least 90%. So that's the same as saying that beta is 10%. And how are they going to do the classification? They're going to use a one-sided 95% confidence bound. And because it's a 95% bound, that means that alpha is 5%. So I'll just repeat that. The programmatic threshold is 90%, and they want to be really sure that when coverage is low, if it's lower than 80%, that they fail the classification. So delta is 10%, direction is below, beta is 10%, and alpha is 5%. And I believe that with those numbers, that should give you enough to either enter the parameters into the spreadsheet or to look them up in the tables in Annex B1.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Dale. So we'll be posting that in writing as a comment to the week 3 community assignment. So obviously you need to be paying attention and checking into the community on a regular basis to see what is new from the course team in order to get the information you need to complete the week 3 assignment. Now, as you've been working on the Harmonia concept note, which is due at the end of this week, as you all know, we wanted to hear from you about your experience and both questions as you've been asking, and we'll follow up and make sure no question is left unanswered if we're not able to get to it right away. But also, if you could raise your hand, we'd love to hear what your experience has been. So we've been looking at your creator projects, and we've been giving feedback to some of you. If you haven't received any, expect to receive a little bit before, by the end of this week. And basically, some people have already gotten near complete, very comprehensive, and in some cases, nevertheless concise concept notes together that have pretty much all the criteria addressed. Others of you have some sections that look complete with some things remaining, some sections remaining to complete. Others obviously got off to a good start but have sort of dropped off and need to get back and refocus on completing the concept note. And then there is a segment of the population that does not have anything in Creator. Now, this could be because you're working outside of Scholar, which is fine, which is an acceptable way to go. But if not, then I would strongly suggest you work on from the catch-up guides we've provided for both weeks and really focus on exclusively on the Creator project. And so, but we'd like to know what some of your dilemmas and challenges have been, and so I would love to see some raised hands. Remember, if you have questions you want to ask him or share your experience, both are acceptable options. All right. So otherwise, yes, it's going to be a very short participatory session. So, okay, Usman Shehu Umar, thank you. Thank you for stepping up, sir. Well, welcome, and I've unmuted your microphone. I'm going to start the timer. If you have a question, then we don't need the timer, but I'll start it. And if you'd like to tell us about your experience of putting together the concept of what you've got left to do, what your questions and dilemmas have been, that's what we'd love to hear about and then respond to.
Yes, thank you. I'm enjoying this course. My key dilemma is how to balance the brevity or conciseness vis-a-vis what the rubric is given and the details that the project seems to require. Looks like it's going to be more than 2 to 3 pages. So that is a dilemma. How concise to be? Can I just put bullets and just leave it? Or do I put more details and then risk going beyond the 3 pages? That's one dilemma. Secondly, the issue of stratification. I felt, does it need to stand alone? I mean, it could be discussed under the study design. So I'm a bit confused what to put in the stratification because unless if I'm going to go into a lot of details. So these are 2 of the dilemmas that I have. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Usman. Dale and Carolina, would you like to respond to those two on those two issues? And we did address a little bit the question of concision, but you'll need to unmute yourselves.
Okay, Carolina here. I hope you can hear me this time. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. So the dilemma about the length, personally, I find it easier to put more and then cut. That's a personal preference. Again, we have given you an example, which is just one example, the Bolivia one, but you're free to add or less or more as you are thinking about who your audience would be, which would be a Ministry of Health or somebody who's going to agree or not with the design of the survey you're proposing, and that is going to go with that proposal to look for money usually, or at least to say, well, we had planned a survey and we had put 50,000 and it's going to cost us 250,000, which happens. So then the next question about the stratification, is that's the question, correct? That's a difficult question. That's reality where you would like to have many strata and give one estimate for every strata with good precision, but then you have to decide in your concept note. You can. That's why in the practices in community we're doing different scenarios. In your concept note, you can pick one of those scenarios and justify it, or you can pick another scenario where you can say, I'm going to do, I don't know, just to give you an example, capital cities in the provinces and everything else as another strata. Did I miss anything with the question? I think that's, I hope that answers your dilemma. And again, the next 2 weeks when people are giving you feedback, you will get to work on your concept note and see many other concept notes that can help you. So there are some questions for Dale now. Over.
Dale, you also need to unmute yourself. You may be waiting for Carolina to do so. All right, and do raise your hand if you'd like to do as Usman and Michael and others have done so we can actually hear your voice. Okay, I see Jaurès. Okay, Jaurès Churchill. Yeah, I've unmuted you, so you can unmute yourself. And I see also Ifeanyi Stanley Muogalu. And Dale seems to be having an issue with his microphone, so...
My microphone is okay. I'm not sure which question to address.
Okay. Okay, Ifeanyi seems to have been disconnected from the audio. Jaurès, would you like to go ahead, please? Your microphone is unmuted.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I wanted just to ask a question on the role of the steering committee or the statistician. Is it necessary to in the concept the outline of this different committee, because this committee can play important role for to find the money. So it's necessary to explain briefly in the concept, not there. Thank
you. That was, I'm sorry, but that was broken up for me. Maybe Dale or Carolina managed to clearly hear the question, or someone else, or if I could ask you to summarize the question in the chat, that would be much appreciated. I was not able to hear your question. I'm sorry about that.
Neither were we.
Okay. Yeah. So this this happens, Jaurès. It does sound like it's definitely worth asking. So please do type it into the chat, so we'll be able to respond to it either right away or after the session.
Okay.
And,
I will write.
All right. Okay. And he's muted himself again. So, So are there others whose voices we would like we'd love to hear your voices, and if you can lower your hand after you've had a chance to speak. And I see, of course, there are many questions flying by in the chat window. Yeah. So Talila Ahmed is asking a question that's come up several times about picking one country to base a concept note, and we did consider this, and that is, in fact, what we usually do in Scholar is ask people to work on their own country context. In this case, we are asking and expecting everyone to work on the fictional case of Harmonia. There are reasons for that, because in this case we are talking about doing sample size calculation, which means a mathematical calculation which we want to be able to verify. So we made the decision to ensure that everyone in this module would be working on the same case. But again, we just sent out a message from the course team to your mailbox in which we call for volunteers to present their real-world vaccination coverage survey, either one that you've been involved with in the past or one that you are working on now, in order to and we'll be giving details about what kinds of presentations we have in mind and how this can also help you either reflect on a previous vaccination coverage survey of the past or work on one. Okay, Maureen has her hand raised. Maureen, welcome. Just unmuted you. I would love to hear your voice and hear about your dilemmas, challenges, eureka moments, progress, and breakthroughs you've been making with your concept note. How are you doing? So Maureen, I have unmuted you. You may want to check that your microphone is connected properly. Otherwise, we may not be able to hear from you. Okay, it looks like we're not going to be able to hear from Maureen. So again, participation in the discussion group, and I hope this will encourage rather than discourage you from attending future sessions. We're going to make more and more room for you to speak, for you to share your experience, both with the coursework, but also more generally with the work that you are doing around vaccination coverage surveys. So next up is a taste of what we're going to be doing in the coming weeks. Before I go there, I want to turn to Dale and Carolina to see if they have spotted questions in the chat that they would like to either highlight orally or explicitly answer. Yeah.
No, Rita, I see the comments. Some people find it all a little confusing, that alpha, beta, ESS, ICC. Watch the videos again, read the appendix again, and I can try to say it another way. I'll try to make a video that comes at it from another angle, but hang in there. You could also, Google and look for other resources. So the strategy that we're using for calculating sample size here is not different than is done for other studies. There are a few details that are different, but the overall strategy, the meaning of alpha and beta, you can also Google those and maybe find an instructor that describes it in a way that connects with you as well. Over.
Okay, thanks. And please raise your hand if you wish to share your real-world budgeting experience. What would be great would be to hear just about, in particular, the sort of difference between planning and forecasting and trying to estimate versus what happens at the end of the day with respect to the actual budgets. I see Maureen still has her hand raised but doesn't seem to have her microphone on. So if, and we actually had somebody spontaneously share their experience before the session started, so I'm hoping some of you will step up again. So there is a little hand raised, or you can just tell me that in the chat. Okay. All right. Let's go to Bo Roberts.
Hello again. I heard you were getting into trouble, so let me help you out. I think the most important thing when we're looking for budgets in any survey is to get the budget of a previous survey. I don't really think you can operate without that. It has to do either if you're national or international and you have to build this. It's important to have at least one anchoring point in the past. We all know, and we are all professionals, that we as individuals would like to receive more money for the work that we are doing, and that is the case too when you deal with budgets for projects. So whatever proposals that are coming your way and estimates, you will have to what should I say, draw a parallel, draw lines to what has previously been paid for services, and it also gives you the idea about where a budget perhaps has gone over budget before and where money could be saved. I think, I mean, we know in general that fieldwork is the part of the budget that eats the most, and that's certainly the case for the larger surveys. The variable costs, so to speak, the costs that are associated with going to the field and traveling to clusters, etc. And even the slightest increase or decrease in any estimate or what should I say, real expense on per diems, on fuel consumption, on car rentals, and hostel accommodation, whatever is needed, is a huge cost or cost saving. So that's really one of the areas to target. I think the budget templates that most survey programs have, including the new API guidance, are great, and it gives you the overview of what you need to take into account. In fact, I mean, I would like to say that in the surveys where I've been involved with the budget, that of course we go over budget, but in reality that has not really been the case, because I think most people involved in surveys, or at least those people that we generally deal with, have become really good at these exercises over time, and understand that it's very difficult to go over budget or under budget for that matter. It's actually even worse to go under budget because nobody wants their money back once it's allocated. So my key point, let me return to that, is gather as much as possible of real budgeting and real expenses from previous surveys to inform each of your budget lines. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. So we have 2 minutes left. We are going to sharply end at the top of the hour. So I'd like to ask Dale and Carolina for any last thoughts and comments and words of encouragement to the participants, as we are in a crunch week midway through the course. Next week will be very different, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But first, let's hear a final word from our subject matter experts. Carolina and Dale, I'm not sure who would like to.
Great, thank you, Rita. Okay, so this is Dale. You know, don't be discouraged. Hang in there. We can. We'll work on clarifying additional concepts if there are concepts that need to be clarified. It would be nice if the country of Harmonia had additional detail, but you'll have to work with what you have there. Thanks for the insight from the real world, Bo. That was helpful. And you know, press forward, do the best you can, and then it'll be great to begin looking at each other's projects also in Creator, and to do the peer review and to see. We'll learn from each other. So we're all just starting together. So my message is to not be discouraged and press forward as best as you can.
Thank you. Thank you, Dale. Yeah, Carolina?
Yes, thank you everybody for hanging in there. We also thank you for keeping up with this course because we know it's intense. And please do send us all your questions. And if we do not reply to them, please send them again, because for us the most important part in the next 3 weeks, we are halfway through this module 1, is that by week 6 all the concepts are clear, and that when you do have to write a concept note for your country or for a survey you are helping with, you feel familiar and comfortable in doing it. And you also feel that you know that there will be uncertainties and that your design may change and that you may have to redo sample size calculations until you arrive to a number that is affordable. So just hanging there, ask your questions, and bon courage. That's encouragement for the next 3 weeks. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you, Carolina and Dale. So this is the end to the mandatory and formal discussion group. So thank you for your attendance, attention, and contributions. Again, do prepare yourself to be called on if there are an insufficient number of volunteers, or if it's the same people who consistently have to present. I hope this will encourage you rather than discourage you from participating. So now I would like to recap the schedule of the course. And again, this has been very explicit and very detailed from week 1. So do take the time to review what was initially announced. We are sticking to the plan. You can see here in each week and the specific sections of the Harmonia concept note that you were intended to be working on, and specifically received guidance, videos, examples, as well as guiding questions and specifications for each section. So week 4 and 5 is going to be about peer review. And of course, do type your questions. So you're free to go from now that we're past the top of the hour. But if you'd like additional guidance, if you have specific questions or problems, especially problems with Creator, worried about exactly how you're going to submit your concept note, I'm going to try to walk you through some of that, and we'll pause if anybody has specific questions. So. So this is, we've almost through week 3. And weeks 4 and 5 are about giving and receiving feedback. So again, to be a little bit more explicit, here are the slides that were shared in week 1, describing explicitly all of the tasks, deliverables, the specific things you'll have to learn to do or apply in Scholar, and then looking ahead. Now I haven't, here you do not see week 6. Week 6 is actually about revising your concept notes. So it's a very important week. It's the last week, and hopefully you'll have a sense of completion and accomplishment. But in order to finish your work, you will need to take the feedback you receive from peer review, process it, make sense of it, integrate what you've learned by looking at the projects, the concept notes of others, and then go back and revise and finalize your concept note. But right now we've got 2 weeks ahead of peer review. We hope you'll enjoy those weeks. You're going to see what your colleagues have been working on, 3 of them, and your task will be to focus on really what, how you can help them improve their work, whether that's with respect to concision, because they've written something very comprehensive, overly comprehensive perhaps, or whether it's because there are sections that require correction and rectification. Whatever it may be, we're going to rely on you using the rubric as your guide to provide structured feedback, constructive criticism. But in order to qualify for the next stage of the course, you do need to submit your draft concept note. So the week 3 community assignment is also due on Sunday evening. But if you need to prioritize one, prioritize your concept note. I'll tell you why. It's because in order to be fair about peer review and to do a good job at peer review, it's going to take time. Do not underestimate. It may seem easy to read just somebody else's work, especially because you all know the Harmonia case now. But in order to formulate good constructive feedback, useful suggestions on how they can actually improve their concept note, that's going to be the work that we're giving you 2 weeks to do. So it is going to be a different pace than the first 3 very hectic weeks, but do not underestimate the time requirements either, and make sure you do have time to process and to work through these these works. So now I want to take a minute to walk you through the process of peer review, and there will be of course tutorials, and if you are fine, if you found the tutorials to be good enough for you to make sense of what you need to do in the course, you probably do not need to sit through me showing you how to do these things, but to give you a sense of what that's going to look like, then I'm going to walk you through that. But first, let me stop here. Are there any questions? Anybody with a burning question or problem that we can try to fix in a few minutes and maybe hopefully help people avert these specific issues? So. All right. Yes, of course, Dharmesh. Let me unmute you. Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, very good evening.
Welcome.
Yeah, and I'm really enjoying the course, and learning a lot of things which I was not knowing earlier.
Okay, that's good to hear, sir. Thank you.
Yes, I am really thankful to all the great work and hard work you have been doing and responding so promptly, even through the WhatsApp messages, even at odd hours.
Right.
Okay. Now my question is that suppose if we are preparing a budget as one of the components of this concept note. So I was thinking suppose if I am working in India, can I make the budgetary provision as per the unitary cost is as prevailing in India?
Yes, I would say yes. I believe Carolina's indication was to limit, to keep it at a very high level, and that you're not actually expected to give, a figure. But if you are able to, with respect to your own context, instead of the fictional one of Harmonia, then please do so, as long as you make it clear to your reviewers that that's what you are doing. You need to indicate that you just made the choice.
Yeah, because while, as you will be concur with me, while we are preparing a budget for any kind of these studies, we need to first consider the unitary cost.
Right.
So unitary cost, as per this note which you have circulated about Harmonia, the draft, which do not mention the kind of currency they are using, the wages they are having. So we do not have that idea as researchers with us, So what I was thinking in my mind was to apply the unitary cost as prevailing in India and then accordingly draft my budget. Is that okay with you, or is that allowed?
Yeah. Yes, it is and should be. Again, this is a fictional exercise, so if that enables you to push further ahead with the budgeting part of the concept note, then by all means, yes, please do so. Okay,
and as you suggested, I will be mentioning the unitary cost for calculation also.
Yeah, sorry, I did not catch that.
I was telling that as you just suggested to me for peer reviewers, I will be mentioning the unitary cost which I am going to calculate for my total budget, so that any reviewer who is expert to this assignment can have a fair idea of the background.
Yes, that will help them, yeah. Unlike the real world where you would not be explaining to the steering committee what the context is or what the costs are in their country, in this case, it'll be useful. Keep your reviewers in mind. You'll position yourself if you don't know anything about what you're describing or the choices you make. You want to make sure that, as an author, that you provide that those pieces of context. Okay, we have two questions or several questions in the chat. So how to locate assignment? Yeah, you're very welcome. I hope that's helpful. So again, to locate assignments without going through all the activities. So again, there's the link which I have shared. Wait, I need to fix my chat here. So first of all, bookmark this link, and that'll give you only the updates from the course team. Use the catch-up guides. Okay, so those really summarize only the most essential. Okay, let me try to fix. Yeah, is that better for screen size? Okay, can somebody say, yeah, okay, great. Yeah, so in the shares here, as you can see, we've got the week 2 catch-up guide, and then we've got a week 1 catch-up guide. And those are one-page documents that tell you really what you need to, what you need to do. About Francophone participants, review the concept note for an Anglophone participant? No. So the way we're doing it is if you wrote in French, you'll be reviewing a concept note in French. And if you wrote in English, you will be reviewing a concept note in English. On MECA's difficulty in understanding sampling using classifications and comparisons, would appreciate if there were questions relating to it which would help to better understand the sample size calculations. So MECA, I would advise, if you have not done so already, to 1, look at the relevant sections of the manual, 2, look at the videos from Dale Rhoda, and then do follow up. Dale kindly suggested that you email him, so you'll find his email in the slide deck. So hopefully that will be helpful. We realize, as Carolina said last week, this is new for everyone, or most everyone, and therefore then there is a learning curve, and we are going very quickly in this case, but that is how we are proceeding. So obviously there's a very great willingness from Dale and the rest of the team to provide more direct support. Now from Nusat Rafiq, I hope we will get the recording to catch up on delays caused by technical issues. Yes, absolutely. So that, in fact, as long as you're registered in GoToTraining, you receive an email that contains the link to the recording, but we also post it in the community. So let's go to the to Creator. And so to tell you what will happen on Saturday, for those of you who submit on Friday, so everyone is going to get a notification on Saturday that you are now late. The notifications does not take into consideration the fact that Carolina has granted everyone an extension. You'll still get a notification saying you're late. You can ignore that notification until Sunday evening, given that you have been granted an extension. So that's the first caveat that I want to share. Next, you will be receiving 3 notifications. So you remember you received 1, which led you to start your Creator project. And at that time, it was very easy because here in Works, you only had 1 project, okay? Now, starting as soon as you accept these notifications, you're going to have 3 different projects, and they're all going to be called the same thing. So the easiest way to find your way around is going to be to go back to the notifications to sort of navigate between your own project, which you won't really be touching for the next 2 weeks, and the 3 projects that you are going to be peer reviewing. So I've pulled out a blank project. Here on the left-hand side, obviously, you will see a you will see a detailed concept note. Okay, and I do see a very good question from Terodros. I did skip a step, which is, yes, how do you submit? So once you are certain that your concept note is finalized, you will see down here, let me see if I can find a better example on another. Yeah, so what you will see here at the bottom of your concept note are 2 buttons, Submit for Review and Save. So I've told you in week 1, you should not touch these buttons until you have completed your project. So Scholar saves your work automatically. You don't need to be saving new versions. Some of you have done that anyway. There are no grave consequences, but starting on Friday, and because of the extension, until Sunday evening, or as soon as you can, you are expected to submit for review. So you click on this button, and you will get a message saying, up here you'll see a little green bar showing up, telling you, confirming that your work has been submitted. And here, in About This Work, under Project Status, instead of Draft Pending, you will then see Feedback light up. And feedback, of course, is due on 2 weeks from now, right? So that is the process for, you just click on this submit for review button. Up until Friday evening, you can still unsubmit. However, we are stuck with the original deadline with this respect. It's especially important starting on Friday that you do not submit for review unless you are completely done and sure that this is a concept note you want others to review, because once the deadline goes past, you can no longer unsubmit. All right. So that is step one. Step two will be receiving the notifications. Yes, and then once you receive the notifications, you'll have to figure out how to navigate between your work and the 3 works that you've been assigned to review. All right. Now, let's say that I go to a work here. And one of the suggestions, an optional activity to, if you want to sort of get a feel for peer review and also do a kind of self-evaluation for your own work, you can do that right away by going to the feedback tab over here. So here, this should seem familiar, these review criteria, that's the rubric, okay? And the idea is that you've got your work on the left-hand side here, and then on the right-hand side, you have the guidance, the questions, the guiding questions, the advice, the specifications for what you should be writing up. So let's skip over, okay, this is for a different course. Let me go back to ours, to Harmonia. It's a different rubric. Each project, will have a different set of guidance, of course. So here is what should be familiar. So you can read through the rubric. Of course, it's available in PDF format, and that's actually more convenient. And here you have all of these criteria, all of the questions. There's no formatting, so it's all sort of one lump block, so it's easier to probably to refer to the PDF. But so to do a self-evaluation, you would click on Review Work. And here this panel opens up, and you can see here that you've got all of the criteria that are in your that are in the rubric, and you can see that each criterion has a little slider here. So yes, and this is how you assign a rating. If you want to know what the rating corresponds to, you just click on the little orange arrow here, and this will actually tell you. So if the concept note contains no indication of how doing this survey would be relevant or useful to the National Immunization Program, then you assign a 0. If there is, just inadequate, incorrect, incomplete, inappropriate, unrealistic, so these are all very negative evaluations, but with respect to the relevance and usefulness, then that's a 1. A 2 if there are major improvements. Minor improvements is a 3, and that scale will read differently, but it's basically the same logic. So what you'll do is you'll read through the concept note, think about, okay, well, how well did this person summarize how and why the survey will be relevant and useful for the National Immunization Program. And now I'll tell you what's not useful. This, hopefully you can see it. This person gave a 4. If I gave a 4 and just had a 2-word, and you do need at least 2 words of explanation, and you just say good job. Think about the author. The author might be pleased to receive a very positive rating, but they will be completely clueless about what's good about the job they have done. So your task here is to actually formulate constructive suggestions, feedback, explain how you did it, explain what a better way of doing it might be and why. You want to explain why. So why am I giving a 4 out of 4? Or why am I giving a 1 out of 4? Whatever you choose, the important part is not the rating. The important part is the explanation you provide that is going to actually help your colleague, help your fellow participants in the course, revise their concept notes so that it is improved at the end in the final week of the course. So if you are doing a self-evaluation, everyone in your creator project, you will see this review work, And you can ask these questions about your own work. Have I summarized, in this case, in the first person, how and why the survey will be relevant and useful for the National Immunization Program? And you can be, you can be candid with yourself. Okay, it's a 3, and there's some minor improvements. And then here you might want to think about what those minor improvements are. Take notes. You may not want to do it in the review work panel, but we actually do care about self-reviews that are submitted. And you will see it if you go to the analytics. That's one of the criteria that is considered informally, for the course team to look at people who are diligent enough to do a self-review. And then you just go through, and you can see thinking through, okay, reading the preliminary budget and timeline elements, downloading the attachments, looking at them, thinking about them, figuring out what are the constructive comments, the useful comments that you're going to make and how you're going to formulate them. Because there are so many criteria, even if the concept note is 2 or 3 pages, which would be amazing at this draft stage, it's going to be also a challenge for you to formulate feedback, whether even for self-evaluation, in a concise manner that is going to be useful and compelling for the person receiving the review. At the end of the peer review process, one of the things that's going to happen is that your authors, the people you reviewed, will be asked to evaluate the quality of your peer review feedback. So someone who just says, good job, or yes, please improve, or someone who is not professional or lacking in sort of communication skills, at the end of the peer review process, you will get to comment on their feedback skills and give them feedback that will help them improve with respect to giving feedback. So you don't need to think about that for now. If you want to do a self-review, go through the rubric, look at your own work, think about how you're doing, identify that. This helps you structure, focus your energy in the remaining days until the deadline, what you want to focus on and work on by the end of the by the end of before you submit your own work. Now, you will see in the tutorials that you can also do annotations. So, for example, actually, I need a work here that's got text. So, if I do here, I edit a version and I do. Okay, so if I wanted to add an annotation here. Oops. Okay, so then. So if I wanted to add annotations, give me a second to. You need to switch to view mode, which will be in by default when you're doing a, and then you'll create an annotation, and it's very similar to the way it works in Microsoft Word. You will get to either make a comment or suggest a change about what you've highlighted. So if you suggest a change, you can suggest different types of changes. So this is a guided way to, again, formulate feedback on a specific portion of the concept note. So you can comment on explain the ratings you give for specific criteria, but you can also go into a concept note and highlight something and say, okay, this is excellent, but tell me why. Add a description here, please. Add evidence. There are unnecessary words and phrases or repeated ideas or grammar, punctuation, or spelling issues. You may want to reorganize the structure. You may want to rethink ideas. And again, the important part is telling how or why, not just giving judgments or just that's not the most useful form of feedback. So you'll be discovering these. You can already do these for your own work, and you will receive the notification that you're late, but you can safely ignore that. You're only late after the deadline extension on Sunday evening. And we will, on Monday, we'll connect with the people who have not yet submitted, because we do want everyone to stay on track with the course. And we'll be following up with you if you have not. We'll also be sharing, we may be sharing the names of the people who have submitted to give credit where credit is due, because everyone has a busy schedule. Everyone has challenges in their professional life in addition to family and personal lives. So we do want to recognize the effort that so many of you are making in that respect. So that's it for this week. The most complicated part will be getting started with peer review and making sure that you do not underestimate how much time is required to do a good job to really give useful feedback to your peers. So yeah, any comments? We're now 65 participants. So thank you for staying on, and I hope these sessions, these post-discussion group sessions are useful. Would love to hear some of your voices before we go. If you want to comment on what's coming, peer review is typically the most engaging, intense part of the course. It's the one you've been working hard putting together your own concept note. Now you're going to get to discover and really think about what others have done and reconcile that with what you did. So please, if there are any GRISP alums who would like to say a word about what they gained from last year's peer review process, if you'd like to raise your hand, I'd appreciate hearing your. Okay, Simon, yeah. Yeah, Simon, go ahead, unmute yourself. Okay, you'll need to unmute yourself in order for us to hear you. Yeah.
Yes, hello.
Great.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much for the additional information on the creator. I wanted to know, other than viewing it as there, is it possible to be able to export the whole work completed at a time, so that I can be able to have an estimate of how many pages potentially I would be having in Creator at a given time?
Yes, indeed. Thanks. That's a good question. So you can see here that there's a little printer button, and this doesn't actually send your work to a printer. I'll show you what it does. Let me just get back, just zoom out here. So when you click on print, you can actually export a PDF to look at your own work.
Okay.
Yeah. Or you can view in browser, and what you see in your browser you can then cut and paste back into Word. So if for any reason you prefer to work that way, you want to see what your work looks like when it's when it's got a little bit more formatting. Scholar, unlike Microsoft Word, as we said, minimizes the amount of formatting and just sort of dressing up. We really want the principle, the philosophy is that we want you to focus on what you're writing, not what it looks like or how nicely it's presented. So focusing really on substance. But there is this option to output to PDF or to your browser, which you can then cut and paste into Word. All right. Any other last thoughts? Okay, I see a question from Jaurès. Yeah, so the way to do that is to actually download the PDF of the rubric. So if you go to the community and then you go to the shares, most rubrics are not as detailed and comprehensive as the one for the concept note, but we consider detailed, comprehensive rubrics to be a good thing because of that level of detail. You can always zoom out, but if it's not there to start with, it's much more difficult to gain. So obviously, if you'd like to see the rubric in a more easy-to-read format, this is in the shares. I'm also posting the link to download it directly. So if you have not looked at the shares yet, we just posted for Francophone participants the manual in French. We try to be selective about what we post, and I do want to issue a challenge to you, because if you are in the discussion group, an active participant in the course, we did issue a couple of challenges. One, if you're working on or have worked on a vaccination coverage survey, please do consider stepping up to present and discuss your work with your colleagues. And second, you'll see that there is, for the week 3 kickoff, which I'm looking for now, there are some optional activities, and the optional activities, one of them, okay, so there is the Bolivia Vaccination Coverage Survey concept note, which I would highly recommend reading. It's an example of what a short but to the point concept note looks like. And then if you have a budget and timeline from a vaccination coverage survey that you have been involved with, you're encouraged to share with your colleagues. And the way to share that, you already know how to post an update, but you may also go to these shares and add your own share in the same way that the course team has been doing. And I'll answer Mesret's question in a second. So yes, budget and timeline from Switzerland Vaccination Coverage Survey, which is where I reside. You do need to insert a description to, and then you can link to a URL or you can upload a file. And we do encourage you, if you'd like to share, if you have examples that you think are useful or that you've referred to or used in the past that you're willing to share, willing and able and authorized to share, please do so. It'll take a couple of minutes of your time and may be useful to other participants and might be the basis for further discussion. So yeah, that's a good question about how to add an attachment in Creator. So that's actually covered in the video tutorial, so I invite you to revisit those. But here you can see in the toolbar, you have a number of options. This one will insert an image, and this one will insert an attachment. So if I were to click on it, there are several steps. You browse files, then this opens up another window. I'm not sure if you can actually see it here. Let me see if I can open it up. Yeah. So you'll see a pop-up window like this. Then you upload a file, and then you'll be able to, let me see if I can find an Excel file. Yeah, so this is not, if I wanted to include a table of some kind, then I've put in that table as an attachment. If I wanted, and that's different from, if it's an image, then you can insert it as an image. Mesret, does that answer your question?
Yes, sure.
Okay, great. So it really is that simple. It's a bit, you have to click through a bunch of menus to actually be able to add that attachment. But once you've done it a couple of times, it should be, it's not rocket science. Let me put it that way.
Okay, thank
great.
you.
And of course, you know that I, together with Hannah, are there to support you with all these technical issues with the process of the course. And Carolina Dale and actually a significant number of subject matter experts with deep and broad experience in vaccination, in all aspects of vaccination coverage surveys, are on hand and have been participating in the discussion groups and in the community, and very grateful for their participation and contribution. You'll be seeing more of them in the coming weeks. So thank you. We are 2 minutes over time, so I am ashamed of myself, but I hope this session has been useful to you, and wish to thank you all. I'll unmute everyone so that we may wishing you the best for this last sprint, and
how are you?
Thank you for your commitment. This is a very impressive group. So I hope that those of you who are a bit behind, that you'll find the inspiration, the energy, and the time to actually catch up. We'll do everything we can to support you. So don't hesitate to get in touch.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.